Hello. Welcome, everybody. Who's ready to get weird tonight?
I'm ready.
Whee!
Heck yeah. Thank you for joining me for this weird little game that I'm really excited to play called Under the Autumn Strangely. I have conned my friends into playing a weird GM-less game that I am very excited about. So thank you both for joining me tonight, and thank you everybody in the chat for joining us as well. Um, Under the Autumn Strangely is a non-hierarchical game without a GM. It's a small indie game that was written by Graham Getz and is intended for collaborative storytelling where we get into some sort of dark ambient vibes in the autumn and see how that goes. I wanted to, before we start, explain the rules a little bit, both so that way we can all refresh our minds, but also make sure that the audience understands. But first, why doesn't everybody introduce themselves, starting with Rara?
Hey, I'm Rara. I will be playing the Arcadian, not the hotel Ted Mosby tore down, but more of a narrator figure. I go by he, they he, they pronouns, and I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. All right, Emma, who the hell are you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Emma. I am the founder and creative director of the Tabletop Tailspinners Network, and I get to be a player for once because there's no GM here. But I am playing the Traveler this evening, and I'm super excited to be here as well and see what kind of weird autumnal spookiness we can get up to.
And I am Juicy Garland, also part of leadership over at Tabletop Tailspinners. I'm in a whole bunch of stuff that we produce. I also am a ridiculous drag queen who loves to make a fool of myself. And I am excited because I am playing the Terror, where I will be bringing in the creep, we'll say. So I'm really excited to see what kind of a story we can tell tonight. So going over the rules a bit, the way this starts is we, as the Traveler, the Arcadian, and the Terror, will come up with a few details. And we'll go over those in a moment. And once we have those details written down in our notes, we will then start by getting into a chapter that will be introduced by, if I remember correctly, the Arcadian. Then, after we get through that chapter, there are a few things that have to sort of be achieved in order for us to do that. First is a question that we ask at the top of the chapter has to be answered. Then one of us runs out of what are called change tokens. And once we have done that, any one of us can end the chapter and we can fade out and move to the next. And time is a bit wibbly wobbly between each of them. So it could be immediately after, or we could have delay of any of our choosing. So I'm really excited. This, I think, is going to be an interesting story, and I'm really, really eager to get going. So, does anyone else want to say anything before we get going and start with our details for the Traveler?
How you doing, Juicy?
I'm all right. It's been a long couple of years, but particularly a long couple of days, and I am really excited to just have some fun with my friends. Thank you for asking.
Amazing.
All right. So, Traveler,
Mm-hmm.
I need 3 sets of details from you. So first,
Indeed.
name, age, and pronouns of the Traveler.
The Traveler's name is Catherine Sanderson, or Cat or Kath for short, whichever people prefer. She goes by she, her pronouns and is 20 years old. She appears to others as pale and freckled with wild red hair, rarely tamed. Her nose is either buried in a book or buried in the dirt, sometimes both at the same time. And she sees herself as a future explorer, if she can ever save up the money for college to become an archaeologist. Compared to her peers, she's already behind and has a lot of catching up to do.
Okay.
And before she became lost in the Never Was, she was digging or practicing for her future career, as she likes to call it. However, the hole she dug in her backyard clearly did not stay there. And I believe that's all the details you needed.
Yes. I'm just taking notes so that way I have something to reflect on. Thank you.
Incredible.
All right. Now, Yes. So these are some secret details for the Arcadian. So,
Mm.
Ra Ra,
Mhm,
um,
mhm.
you as the Arcadian need to write down an autumnal pastoral image and a surreal agrarian image. So we'll let you take a moment. So Emma, this traveler,
Hmm.
tell me, so she was digging. What do you mean by digging here? Was she doing an archaeological dig or literally just digging a hole?
She was pretending to do an archaeological dig, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously there is not going to be anything of import in her backyard. Or so she thought until she ended up somewhere where she wasn't before.
Okay. Um,
I am prepared.
you are prepared. Wonderful. And before I, the terror, come up with my detail, which is a general theme to guide narration, I have to write this down and keep it secret. Well, I am thinking, now that I know who the traveler is, can you two start talking about our red lines and yellow lines and go over safety tools?
Yes. So we had kind of discussed that our safety tools. So content warnings, this is a horror game. We can't necessarily predict, since this is entirely improvised, where things will go. So if anything comes up at any point during the stream that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with, please feel free to step away at your own um, as is convenient for you. Come back to the stream if you feel safe. In about 10 minutes, whatever you were uncomfortable with likely will have passed. If you're watching the VOD of this, we will put clear content warnings for more common things on there. We've agreed very much that isms and phobias are red lines. Things like spiders will not be included because I have arachnophobia. And
Mhm.
then things moving or crawling under skin. Um, Hang on, let me find our document if we're
Mhm.
going to read this out loud.
And while you do that, what I will say is safety rules are explicitly built into the rule book here. Graham, the author, really has gone whole hog into safety tools, especially for a game like this,
Hmm.
which is fully unpredictable and definitely horror oriented. So I
Yes.
appreciate Graham for actually providing a huge list of options for safety tools.
And
And
one of the ones
fantastic.
that's on that list, script change, is one that
Mhm.
we will also be using to sort of direct the story within the bounds of what you all see on stream. So if
Mhm.
we say things like pause, fast forward, rewind, those are all part of the script change system. And it is one that I love and highly recommend if you're looking for something that blends well with play. Um, and then as far as lines and veils that we've pre-established, sexual assault, depictions or descriptions of suicide are hard lines, as well as veils on harm to children, animal cruelty, torture, or fade to black for any sexual content, though I don't necessarily foresee that being a thing.
Mm.
Um, anyway, were there any that I missed before we hop into it, just so that we're refreshed?
None for me.
Okay, then in that case,
All
are
right,
we
and
ready to
I
get
am
started?
ready as well. I have a theme.
Okay.
Which I think when we are done, we should discuss our images and themes we have held secret. I think that's what we should end with.
Okay.
Mm. Okay. Arcadian, would you like
Hmm.
to start?
We could call it starting if this journey hadn't been going for some time now. We see Catherine Cat, Miss Anderson, moving down a not well worn pathway, but a slightly worn pathway through the woods. Uh, Maybe it's an animal trail, maybe people use it, but there's a stone wall next to you, about 4 feet high or so, that goes one side of the trail for hours behind you. It's been there consistently, as long as you can remember today. Ahead of you, you see coming into this almost a grove within the wood, the distant grain and wheat fields behind it in the distance, a single windmill. With its wings tattered and broken and ribbons hanging from every one of its almost clock hands as it turns.
Hmm.
Ra Ra, before we proceed, what is our
Mhm.
question for this chapter?
Why is the windmill here?
Hmm.
Thank you.
And that is a really good question, and it is one that crosses Catherine's mind. But I think as she's been traveling along, not at all prepared, clothes covered in dirt, and various digging tools clutched in under her arm as she travels, she's been thinking about a different question. As this stone wall has been to her side for quite some time, she doesn't know how long she's been walking, but she has wondered for quite some time what is beyond said stone wall and why it's there. And just as she's sort of wandering along closer to the windmill, which she has noticed and taken note of, she's occasionally being a shorter woman, kind of almost childlike in nature, been sort of hopping up in hopes of seeing over the stone wall from time to time.
And when you do that, a memory comes to mind. This is the edge of your grandfather's farm, and you were always forbidden from going past this stone wall. And you lost your grandfather almost a year ago today. And understanding what's beyond here and why was something that was never told to you. You were just forbidden.
Ooh. I think as she hops to try and look over again, that sort of gives her pause. She can't jump high enough to see over it. And as much as there's a bittersweet sting to that memory, there's also the knowledge that no one is here to tell her she's not allowed to look over the wall anymore.
And there's also the knowledge you'll never get to tell your grandfather what you found.
And she sighs for a moment, letting that sit, before she drops her tools on the dirt path that she's been walking on and begins to try and find footholds and handholds in the stone and work her way up so she can see what's over the wall.
Maybe it's been there the whole time, or maybe it just begun, but you hear strange wind reed like music or melodies going through the woodland, as though a large wind chime was hanging, or a forest that was cut hollow is playing a beautiful melody over an eastern breeze. You can feel it kind of moving around you in an inspiring fashion as the pollen and leaves swirl like the beginning of a quest or the beginning of a secret as you take your tools in hand.
Hmm. And I think the secret is what she's more excited about as she climbs up and up and up towards the top of this wall. Um, she does slip every so often. She's not a super experienced climber, and there are points where she sort of glances down at the distance she's come and is wondering what happens if I fall, what happens if I lose my grip. But she makes herself stop thinking about it because it's hindering her from what's at the top.
What happens if you fall and break your wrists and they don't heal properly, and you'll never be able to dig again?
And that thought gives her pause again. But she's so close to the top. She can almost taste the freedom, the revealed secret, that thing that she was forbidden from all of her childhood. And almost as if she's talking to someone, almost as if someone else asked her that question, even though it came from her, the recesses of her own mind. She does say it out loud. Well, I suppose we'll find out. and puts her hand up on the top of the wall and pulls herself higher to see over the top.
You'll remember the spring your grandfather broke his wrist and couldn't do some of the digging and the working that was required to upkeep the farm. And you so boldly and bravely approached with, "Well, I can do it. Like I've never really dug before, but I could probably be help. I could probably help." And you'll hear his voice say, "Well, we'll find out." And you remember that that's when your passion for discovering things in the dirt began. So, though you may enter here with fear, let it not be a fear that withdraws you from learning and being safe. Maybe you just weren't ready to cross the wall when you were such a small one, and now it's here because you're here.
Hmm. And she smiles at that thought and hoists herself up over the top of the wall and beholds what is beyond, what lingers beyond the farm.
This space goes over rolling areas of underbrush or tree lines and whatnot. It's hard to see too many dozens of yards into the greenery. You do see a well, an old-fashioned well with a little top with a little rope that would probably lead to a bucket, you'd assume, but it looks smaller, more narrow than most. You see a batch of pumpkins that's scattered with corn that's growing up in between it, but they look different. They don't move in the wind like you'd assume. Maybe they're heavy or made of stone, even something of that sort. It's almost like you're looking out at a tableau of a secret wood without any of it really revealing itself as alive or waiting or overly interesting.
And just beyond them, on the top of a hill alone against the sky, is the windmill, slowly rotating in the breeze. The music you heard from the woods is commingling with this hollow whistle as the air is moving through the reeds that form the big windmill fans that have been tattered and are dripping in ribbons.
Hmm. And I think that's when she kind of decides this is the perfect shortcut to get to that windmill. She never was allowed to visit it when she was younger. Her grandfather kept her busy doing other chores on the farm. And I think that's when she decides, I'm going to find out what's in the windmill too. If I can see what's over the wall now, I can see way more. There's so much that I have not been let into because I was too young, because it was hidden from me. And I don't want that to be a barrier anymore. So
As
she
you
begins.
approach the field, you hear a weeping. Muffled.
I think she sort of pauses, looks around for the source. Is it hidden in the brush?
It's
or
somewhere obscured in the gloom.
I think she sort of keeps this in mind, keeps an eye out, clutches her tools close, and still with a bright-eyed curiosity, makes her way through the field in the direction of the windmill and the well.
And the field opens to you as you pass through what's been more of a dense woodland, hard to breathe, hard to see the sky, as you step into this more open pasture area with a few scattering of trees. You can breathe deeper, you can dream a little higher, and at least you could see danger coming if there was danger in this place. Why did your grandfather tie ribbons to things?
I think it was because he wanted to be able to spot them easier from greater distances. His as his eyesight faded
Hmm.
in an older age. He wasn't able to tell immediately from a distance anymore what was what. But no matter what, even as his eyesight faded, he could always see color a little brighter, he said. And I think as that happened, he began tying ribbons to things so that even if he couldn't identify them from a distance, he could identify the color that he'd associated with them and know all the same what was there.
And while you're thinking about that, what you see as the corn parts before you is a scarecrow leaning on the ground, face down, its pumpkin head pecked at by birds, the straw pulled out and thrown about, and from it is a muffled weeping.
I think that gives her pause, because scarecrows aren't supposed to weep. And she'd never met one that did when she was younger. And for the first time, we see a little bit of caution creep into her as she stops moving forward and sort of calls out, Are you okay?
And there's a panicked cry as you notice old, tattered, and faded ribbons are tied to the jacket. Muffled, help me. Help me. Please.
Oh. Um. I think she looks at it, uh, stumbles closer, still trying to put things together,
Hmm.
but shoos away any birds that are left pecking at it and kind of looks it over a little bit closer, sort of um, daring to get closer, trying to almost see if there's a person stuck in this scarecrow or something, and is like, how can I help you?
And like with a twitch, a stiff twitching, you hear like a muffled, help! Help! Help!
Okay, it's okay, calm down. Would it help if I stood you back up?
Anything! Please!
A group
Okay.
of crows all take off at once and like leave the surrounding plants. A dim comes to the meadow, not one of danger, but one of somberness.
And she takes note of that because it makes it a little harder to. She was trying to peer through like the torn
Hmm.
seams where all of the straw was coming out of, trying to see if there were limbs to be found within it, but there are none. And as she sort of narrows her eyes and sort of furrows her brow at the light abandoning her in this moment that she needs it, reaches down and starts trying to help the scarecrow up. Oh, am I hurting you? I don't know what to do. I've never seen a scarecrow that's like this before. What happened to you?
And as you struggle to like help pick it up and maybe stand it up, you see its face is locked in this horrible rictus as the pumpkin head was carved with a smile, but it's like weeping like the pumpkin goo from the inside instead of tears.
Hmm.
It's inconsolable and can only twitch, it can't really move because it's not a people. And he's just like, thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
Kat, while you're holding them up, what color is the ribbon you instantly see on your wrist, already tied there?
Purple.
Perfect.
And it's weird because she doesn't remember tying it on her wrist today. But if she was going to wear it would have been today. And she kind of shakes her head, keeps it from distracting her, turns back to the scarecrow and is like, um, I don't know if I'm strong enough to get this pole back in the ground, but I can certainly try if that would be helpful.
It won't matter.
Why not?
I'm useless. I can't scare the birds. They eat me.
Well,
All I have left is the end.
let's not be so glum. I'm sure we can find a way to fix this. Maybe you just need to look scarier for the birds to leave you alone?
And he tries to look angry, but the smile won't leave, and birds have pecked out some of the teeth.
Hmm. I think we can find a way to fix this.
And you notice as you're moving him that some of the ribbons they're like patterned fabric that you remember your grandfather had, but now they're faded and tattered
Hmm.
remnants.
And I think in this moment, she will sort of find where the scarecrow was stood up originally and try and put it back upright, um, tapping the dirt with her foot to try and pack it denser around the pole that it stood up on. But as she does so, she's going to think back to what the scarecrows in the fields that she was able to see looked like. And a lot of them did have those smiling faces still. But what made them scary to the birds was her grandfather would give them big hats that were very colorful and distracting and made them look a lot bigger. So she kind of looks at this one and goes, "You're missing a hat. Did you have one?"
No.
Oh. Well, that's probably why you're not scary. The birds always avoided the scarecrows when they had hats.
Where can I get one?
Well, we'll have to make one, since you didn't have one before. I was hoping you did. But let me see if I can find something in the field to make you one. Do you think you can hold out and be scary while I go find one?
Maybe.
Okay, here. How about this? And she takes one of her digging tools from out from under her arm. It's one of the larger shovels, and she puts it in his hand and sort of closes the straw around it, and repositions his arm so that he's holding it up like as if he would be swinging it at the birds. And she says, "This should be good enough for while I'm gone. If the birds come back and they don't ignore you, just... my name is Catherine. Just yell for me, okay?"
Yes.
Okay.
And as he says yes, the tool slides down about a third of the way in the tuft of hay where a hand should be.
Right. And she sort of picks it back up and repositions it so that it's sort of tucked into the tuft of hay, and tries to double check that it's not going to hurt him if she tucks it directly into the arm. More like if someone had a hook hand for a pirate kind of deal.
Thank you, I think.
Of course.
And with the gift not just given, but also secured, in the distance you see the windmill turning from an unseen wind. Not fast, not rapid, but definitely an increase in that natural speed. You can almost feel that unseen wind on the tops of the corn passing through the scarecrow, and suddenly you hear birds again. You hear little creatures in the underbrush, as though some spell has been disrupted. and you can hear the world coming back out of it.
And the crows are laughing, glutting themselves on the insides of the scarecrow from his mouth because the smile is unable to close.
Hmm. And Catherine looks concerned at where the crow calls are coming from. And she almost shouts into the woods for a moment. Well, she does shout. She doesn't almost. She starts in a small voice, but then realizes she's not a child anymore and says, "Now you crows leave him alone." And then continues forward to try and find the materials that will make him a hat scary enough to keep them away.
You can see almost a late afternoon fog is beginning to creep further in at the periphery of your vision. You can still see acres and whatnot, but it all ends with this same gray cloud. You could head to the windmill. There's a well. You see maybe like an old abandoned work wagon out in the field, but those would probably be the only three objects that would really draw your attention besides just wandering through
Mhm.
nature.
Well, the wagon could have something, but the windmill is the only building, which is going to have more materials anyway, especially if it was used for some sort of storage. She never knew why it was there. She would like to know why it was there and what sort of things the inside of a windmill would be used for. But if anything, she's probably going to find something near there. And if not, she can check the work wagon. So she'll head towards the windmill first.
And as you do, the hollow, vacant call of the noises whistling through the windmill blades beckons you tremulously.
Hmm. And
I'm
she's
going to spend my first change token to actually know but that. For a moment, the song, you can feel goosebumps rising, almost like a fight or flight's kicking in. And then you remember the old forest wind chimes your grandfather would carve to scare away intruders and make tourists feel a little uneasy in the deeper farmland. And whether or not this is that, it does center you in a way that sometimes the things we're afraid of, we're supposed to be afraid of.
Mm.
Do we think the door's locked, Terror?
No.
I don't think so either.
Mm. And I think she kind of smiles at that as she opens the door to the windmill, sort of repeating this little mantra in her head as she's been centered. Like, I'm no tourist. This is my grandfather's farm. I've known this place. I don't know this part of it, but I've known this place, and this place is home. And
You know, the weird thing is the door opens perfectly silently, with no resistance.
mhm. And I think she sits in that silence for a moment. This farm was rarely silent.
Did you
And
expect more of a welcome home than a silent door?
Mhm.
How do you feel when you look into this first space and you see a life-size wooden sculpture of you, with wood chips and sawdust around the ground and some small wood tools? There's also one or two other doors that lead to other spaces.
I think caught off guard.
Hmm.
Um, her grandfather did work with a lot of different materials. I don't think she ever, during her time there, saw any sculptures that would hint that this was a possibility.
Hmm.
And so to see this aspect of the farm sort of hidden and this aspect of her grandfather hidden away in this decaying building is strange.
And how do you feel about the fact that this sculpture represents everything about you that your grandfather expected of you, wanted you to do, anticipated? and how that is absolutely the opposite of what you have wanted for yourself. And what exactly is that image?
Hmm. The image is much more tame than she is now, or would ever dream herself to be. Her puffy red curls have been braided and tucked very neatly into a bun that she's never worn in her entire life. And though it looks like her, um, she's carrying a basket uh, that looks to be filled with eggs from what she can see. And that was never a chore she liked. She despised collecting eggs from the chickens. The rooster was particularly mean to her. Um, and it almost looks like he was imagining her grandmother in her and what she and the possibility that she could take after her grandmother, who was always this very stoic, very poised figure in her life that, while she loved, never felt that she emulated in any way. And that he sort of imagined her taking over the farm in that same way that she acted. And she sort of frowns at it when she realizes all these details.
There's one small piece of this sculpture that he clearly spent endless hours refining, perfecting, capturing every single detail in. It represents everything he expected of you that you hated, and his hope that died when he did. What is that detail?
I think it was the hair. This idea that one day it could be tamed, could be refined to a point that it would not be so wild and chaotic.
What does it mean to you that this piece of pride that gives you joy is such a disappointment to this dead man?
It's a it's almost a disappointment to her at first that leads to a bit of anger. When she was a child, she was never made to feel like she wasn't enough. But this image and knowing that this is what he truly wanted makes her feel like what she did, how much of herself that she revealed to him was never enough. And I think realizing that, she would kick the sculpture over.
As it falls, you have a memory being younger with your grandfather saying how happy he was your hair was so bright because he'd never have to tie a ribbon around you to find you. And as the statue falls, do you think any of it chips or breaks?
I think the head breaks.
Hmm.
And I think as it rolls, that hair that he was so prideful of, that he took so much time sculpting, begins to fall to pieces with chips littering the floorboards. And I think it sort of stops on a floorboard that's sort of tilted up, that isn't quite in line anymore. And as it thunks against the floorboard, the face sort of lands looking at her and has sort of chipped just a little bit. But she kind of looks down at it and goes, "You're not me."
You
You
know,
never.
what's weird is when the head shatters, you suddenly remember how he used to brush your hair constantly, trying to get it tidy and straight and perfect, and then ask your grandmother to braid it. What you did not realize is that he was collecting your hair for years, because when the head shatters, it nearly explodes, overwhelming the floor around it with old wads of your hair springing about. The wind moving through the windmill makes them twitch. Are they alive?
I certainly hope not. And I think she would kick some of it away just in case it was, as she sort of moved, skirting around this sculpture that's now fallen like a bombshell, or that she didn't want to touch in case it should go off.
When you kick it, you hear a soft, tiny, ow.
Nope. And she says that out loud as she moves as quickly as possible to the next room.
Since I set up this room, I will let the terror paint this next one.
Mm-hmm. You walk up some stairs. You can hear the engine of the windmill turning, turning. And what you see is a workbench and papers. And you walk up to the papers, and what you see are, oddly, tables of numbers. Money. Your grandfather was watching the farm fail for decades. And when you look at them, you can see that the accounts of the farm dwindle into nothing and then into negative. And suddenly you know why you did not inherit the farm. He could not manage his work.
I think she pores over these documents for a minute, realizing just what that means. She questions why, if his workmanship of wood was so strong, though strange, from what she experienced downstairs.
Oh.
She sort of looks back, hearing that again. No, do not follow me. You are not me.
And there's a rustling in the shadows.
Do I need to kick you again?
You see a ribbon blow in a breeze in this room, connected to a perfect hat on the corner of a chair. You don't really remember your grandfather wearing this hat, but over a lifetime, one went through quite a few hats, and it has almost like a burgundy ribbon tied to the side.
She kind of smiles, walks over to it.
It giggles.
Was everything just alive and I didn't know it when I was a kid? She picks up the hat.
It's just a hat. What are you talking about?
She kind of looks it over. Makes sure. Okay. If it's not the hat making noise, then where is it coming from? Perfect. She's gonna put the hat on while she walks away to go find... it is a nice large hat, but she needs to put some natural stuff on it to make the birds not want to sit on it.
Oh, just on the wind. Is that the sound of the pumpkin screaming? It's so soft now.
Oh, damn it. And she runs back down the stairs to...
As you're running out to head out the door, you see, though the hair-filled head did roll away and open up to this sculpture, but from where the spine would have been if this wooden thing had such an item, you see a thick green verdant vine that's grown out of it and has begun to kind of weave and trace its way out the door into the dusk light.
Huh. I think as she sees it, she's gonna follow it. Very loosely as she's heading back to where the scarecrow is.
I would say the path splits at one point where it's almost to the left to the crying scarecrow. The right, the vine kind of is arcing to that small well you saw earlier. Maybe just wanting water.
She'll follow the path to the scarecrow.
Mhm.
Interested to see if this vine blooms anywhere or if there's anything, what its purpose is, and where it's even growing from. How is it
And
hidden away in that statue the whole time?
you're so focused on this vine, and it sounds maybe like it's whistling like a tea kettle as it grows. That when you get closer to the scarecrow, you're startled as there's an explosion of crows. And what remains is just the lower quarter of the pumpkin, its innards sort of spilled out, pumpkin seeds dripping down over the lapels of the jacket covered in worn and tattered ribbons.
Well, I guess that means we have to get you a new head, huh? I'm sorry. She kind of looks at it and looks at where the crows have flown off to. And I think there's one that has sort of lingered near the pumpkin head, and she takes off the hat and waves it at the crow to scare it away.
And it flies away laughing.
Yeah, laugh all you want. You won't be eating any more pumpkins after I'm back.
In the middle of the skull of the pumpkin, in the middle of all the mush with the pumpkin strings hanging almost like their own ribbons from the edge of it, you see a very small little shovel, spade, a tiny, brand new, immaculately clean, almost though it was just created, a little digging tool.
Oh. And I think she will reach in and take it and inspect it, kind of surprised. And she looks at what remains of the pumpkin and says, "Thank you. It's lovely." Before taking off into the field to where the pumpkins grow to go find him a new head.
You'll notice as you walk, anytime a bird sees this new tool you've just found, it flies away in terror, recognizing the spirit of the scarecrow within this small shovel. There are pumpkins growing, I'd say, wild in this area. They didn't really have a patch as much as they did a long time ago, and it's just spread and grown over fences and the forest and whatnot. How big of a head do you think the scarecrow needs?
Well, I think part of the reason that it couldn't scare away any crows might have been because it was smiling, but
Mhm.
a lot of the scarecrows smiled, so I don't know that that would do it entirely. But the head was a bit small, and it had sort of started to wilt a little bit, and I think they had identified that it wasn't as strong. So I think she is going to look for a larger pumpkin head, one that would still balance on the body of the scarecrow that is still there, but one that is large enough that it would scare the crows away and look very intimidating.
I'd say there's pumpkins of multiple, even color varieties. You see strange, like blue ones with small orange, like warts on them. There's green pumpkins, ones that almost look like opalescent when the dusk light hits them. Some that sound a little more solid, like a little more dense. There's a whole realm of pumpkins here, almost anything you could imagine.
Hmm. I think she is going to. she's going to pick one of the blue ones.
When you
Oh.
go to touch it, it begins to wheeze and deflate and collapse.
Oh. Well, that's disappointing. I guess these ones aren't as strong as I thought.
Like air being let out of a balloon.
Hmm,
Blue pumpkins are very hard to grow right.
that's fair. And these
Yeah.
ones haven't been tended to for a very long time. And I think she sort of looks them over and she realizes that the orange warts that were described as she moves forward, they're not necessarily like part of the pumpkin itself. They're almost parasites from a different plant. And that's when she realizes that that's why they're not growing right. Because they've
I'm
been
going to
taken
use my
over.
change token.
Oh.
When you lean in and you see them, you realize that they're angry chicken heads biting at you, reaching to make you bleed.
Ah! Oh, fucking chickens. And she will again kick at it and kick it away.
Now, are there chicken necks also terror, or is it just the chicken heads?
Tiny little necks, so they like
Ew.
vibrate with rage.
Well, I guess nuggets gotta come from somewhere.
And as you walk on the soil, there's a crunching as your foot sinks down. Each time there's a crunch. Crunch.
Hmm. I think she sort of lifts her foot to see what is crunching under her feet.
And you realize you're in the middle of a field, and when you pick up your foot, you look underneath, there's an ooze. A yellow, slimy ooze. Crunch. As you shift the weight to the other side.
What the fuck? And she will take a different tool from under her arm and sort of scrape some of the ooze off of her foot, holding it at a distance to try
And you begin
observe
to
it.
sink into the soil as the crunching continues.
Though it may not be a no but as much as a yes also. I think I'm gonna spend my last change one. Like as you are kind of being enveloped or beginning to, you realize it smells like honey. The goldenness of it. And maybe the crunches where some of it's kind of crystallized. But what you might have mistook for like a poison or like something toxic, that the smell just hits you like a spring that's been uncorked after a winter too long.
Hmm. And as she sort of smells it, she's like, why were these planted in honey? And
Crunch.
she is going to almost wade her way through it and try to find some sort of dry land to get her out of this like quicksand like honey.
And by the
Uh,
time you find yourself in up to your thighs, you can feel the scraping of eggshells sliding against your skin,
oh, I hate that.
with the yolk running into your pants.
Okay, definitely need new
Crunch.
pants.
Should save that token.
Cool.
I'd like to fade to black.
No, I think that's a good
Yeah.
chapter
that's-
end.
Mhm.
We answered the question, and I'm out of tokens,
Me too.
and you're
Mhm.
out of tokens too. Yeah.
I was the only one who didn't use any.
Yeah,
Um,
let's take a check-in. How we feeling?
Amazing. Those watching, the way we end a chapter is if we've answered the question we chose at the beginning, and one of
Mhm.
us is also out of change tokens.
Mhm.
Then any player can just be like, that was a good time. Let's shift the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Whew.
now I believe it is the Traveler's chapter.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So, what question will you start with? And because we're not describing songs because those are pre-selected, what's a tone or a word you want to go with?
I think the tone I want to go with, or a word I want to associate with this chapter, is rediscovery. And the question I want to answer is, I think the question I want to answer is if this is what's become of the forbidden portion of the farm. Has it spread to the rest of it? As Catherine finds herself finally, after she almost took a swim in honey, so to speak, stumbling out onto a different dirt path, brushing as much of it as she possibly can off, though it's sticky and clinging to her. And the only river that she knows of that's on this property, is far to the distance, closer to her grandfather's farmhouse than this part of the field. So even though she knows there's a possibility that she could rid herself of this residue, she's far from it for the time being. She managed to salvage some of her tools and keep the spade that carried the spirit of the scarecrow, but clearly she's not harvesting any pumpkins today. The scarecrow will have to wait a little longer. For now, I think there is more farm to explore, and especially seeing as she hasn't been here in a while, and she's never been to this part of the farm. She wants to make sure she explores as much of it as possible.
There is, oddly, you never noticed this before, a barn looming, slightly tilted.
Interesting, she says to herself, as I think there's a resentful little piece in the back of her mind that wonders why her sculpture would have been kept in the windmill instead of the barn. As that's where you would expect more wood carving or things of that nature to be done. She wonders if there were more. She's wondering, as she approaches, if there's more that she needs to smash to get it out of here. Get rid of this image that clearly is not of her, but is supposed to be.
The hayloft tilted is vomiting out rancid hay that's been sitting there for well over a year, since before your grandfather died. You can hear more crows inside, laughing, screeching.
Okay. You better not be tormenting more scarecrows up there.
When you say that and look down at yourself, from the waist down, you have hay stuck to the honey all over you. So you almost look like you might be half scarecrow yourself, especially brandishing this tool grown from the mind, the soul of a scarecrow. I'd say these birds are fairly alarmed and a little threatened by you, not
Especially
nearly taking you as frivolously.
especially wearing that hat, a wish unfulfilled.
And I think as she realizes that, she chases a couple of them off that she sees lingering next to the barn, just because she can. And then looks up at the ones lingering in the hayloft, narrows her eyes at them, trying to see if she can make them go away from this far down, or if she has to go up there in order to get them to go away.
We see the image of you chasing a few crows with overlaid on top of it an image of a very young version of you chasing crows, like cawing at them, flapping in the air, long before there were scarecrows everywhere on the property. Um, there was no barn, but neighbors had barns. So as we see you watching as an adult, with the image of you also as a child, kind of ghostly and over the image, how do you see how you would have gotten into the barns of your neighbors when it was like sneaking out at night to go tell ghost stories in the hay bales, and memories that inspire more of a confidence than a fear in you?
Hmm. I think she was definitely in those nights of sneaking out. Um, if there were companions with her, she was the one telling them, "Oh, it's fine. We're not going to get caught." And was the one leading the charge, as it were. If we're still looking at that overlay of a young version of her as she sort of creeps up to this barn door and wrenches it open, we see a smaller version of her telling her friends, "Come on, help me," and like them slowly and quietly pushing it open, trying as best as they can not to make the little tracks that the doors slide on creak or make too much noise so they're not waking anybody up. And as she slips inside, still nimble as ever, that younger version of her uh kind of has her two hands clenched into fists, like resting on her hips, like looking triumphantly at her friends who didn't think she could do it in the first place, or that said that they shouldn't be here. But oh, look, we haven't been caught. And she remembers those nights of hiding out in people's barns and telling ghost stories to their horses and cows as they rested, and all of the joy that she found from those nights.
And how does it feel remembering the last time when you had that triumphant stance and then suddenly you saw the fear across your friends' faces as a shadow appeared behind you and your grandfather caught you and dragged you back home and yelled at you and told you that wasn't what girls do and kept you locked for weeks in your room?
I think as she remembers that, she deflates a little bit, but only for a moment, as she sort of disappears back into that little girl's mind. And there's a moment as one of the crows caw from upstairs, almost as if they can tell that she's remembering her grandfather. She's broken from that memory. And as she looks up, she looks at the crow and says, "He's not here anymore. He doesn't get to decide what I can do. No one does."
And then the crow erupts with his voice. No! No! And then another no in his voice warped through the crow's throat. No! Another one. And then a chorus of crows shouting no with your grandfather's voice.
And I think as that happens, she looks up at them and is like, "I knew there was a reason I didn't like you." And she is going to rush up into the hayloft to scare them away.
As you do, you can feel the scummy, rotten hay that's been sitting there, lingering in the filth and the humidity and the heat over the summer. And now that it's in the musty autumn, you can smell the sweet, dry rot and feel the like gooey slime of it between your fingers.
Hmm. I think it's a sensation she's felt before. This hayloft was, maybe not this one, but a hayloft at some point was a space that she could run away to. And especially at points where her grandfather got too old to really be climbing into them, they became her escape. And I think, despite the fact that it's starting to decay because it's been left here too long, she pushes through that and finds purchase on the hay that hasn't withered away yet, and pulls herself into the hayloft, taking off the hat and almost like a frisbee, throwing it at the crows until they disperse.
They do, for a moment. The last time your grandfather tried to chase you up the hayloft, and he fell. What happened? What was that like?
There was a level of guilt there. She didn't want him to get hurt. But there was also a level of freedom in that fact that there was a place that he couldn't reach her, where she could make her own decisions.
Had you ever seen him cry before?
No, I don't think so. He's not the type of person to cry in front of anybody.
That's why he couldn't look you in the eye after that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. That was a fun secret to have for a while.
Until he got sick.
Mm-hmm.
But Grandma could look you in the eye that winter, as with the relief of the husband being in bed bound, having to be tended to, she began to teach you books, geology, nature, trails, even poetry, and showed you pictures of the other side of the world and sights you may never see. Thoughts that were usually shouted down, or more important things were waiting for you than books and letters. And that winter is when you finally realized that she was a person and not just a counterpart to your grandfather. That there was a joy and a strength there just as much as a shovel hidden in the skull of a scarecrow that can be pulled out for one day when destiny or magic says today's the day you are needed.
There was also that other book. The one with the dark secrets. The strange lessons. What's the one regret you have from reading it?
Who? I think her one regret from reading it is the time that she read it without her grandmother. I think the power within it wasn't something she quite understood yet. And it was never something her grandfather was made privy to.
How did your grandmother save you, and how did it scar her permanently?
Ooh. I think
I'm going to spend a token to say, how did it change your relationship with her permanently? For good or for ill?
Cheers.
I think in that moment, it made them more of a team than she had ever expected to be. As she had discovered that her grandmother was her own person, and that she was more than what her grandfather had always made her out to be, as this sort of silent companion that did what was asked. She realized that her grandmother had taken back power in her own ways, and when she was able to save her from what appeared outside of the book, she realized that power, and she wanted to be more like her grandmother than she'd ever thought she would want to be.
And back in the present, huddled in the hayloft, surrounded by the rot, laughing, shrieking crows with your grandfather's voice. There's an emptiness. You can never have those moments back
Mm.
if you can't have solace being here. What are you getting?
I'm getting the book. I hid it up here a while ago when he almost found it. And I knew he would never be able to climb up here again.
What do you have to sacrifice to get it?
I think my other tools. I keep the spade because that's important. But the rest of it, the stuff that I brought with me, that I use to fend off the crows as I fetch the book from under the rotting hay. Make sure they can't get their grimy claws on it.
So, power?
Hmm?
Sacrificing power?
Sacrificing a piece of myself.
Hmm.
A bit of the present self, if it
Hmm.
were. And I flee back down the ladder and out of the barn with the book. I wonder what happened to Grandma's other books. If they're still in the farmhouse, or if someone changed it.
You
What do you
see
feel? Oh,
oh.
no, go, Rara, sorry.
Not at right on top of you, but in the distance, you do see the fog lightening in a direction where the farmhouse is visible, a field or two fields away. But you don't see anything that should get too far in your way, as long as the fog stays clear.
And I think I'm actually going to use a change token
Hmm.
for the first time here.
Yeah.
Love it.
There's no buildings or anything that would get in my way. But I notice as I move towards that farmhouse, those vines that started growing from that sculpture, they're appearing more and more across this dirt path. I have to step over them and avoid them because I don't want to touch them.
You know, it's so strange. The tea kettle sound is still there as they grow, like there's an internal pressure whistling, but also they're segmented and shaped like human limbs between each segment. Is that a leg bent? An arm twisted? A throat?
I hate that.
The air's still filled with the smell of honey.
You can see the one that looks like a throat swallow, but there's no mouth.
She kind of stares at it and steps gingerly over it. It's like... And she begins to wonder how they're growing and what they're growing for. But she's not deterred enough to abandon her quest back to the farmhouse. And I think now that she has this book in her hands, she feels a bit more confident that all these strange things that keep appearing, they can't hurt her anymore.
I'm going to use a change token. You don't know they can't hurt you.
Nice.
Well, she doesn't know that for sure. But
Just like these vines yourself, what are you growing for?
she's growing to have a dream.
Are you growing?
I feel like I am. I'm
Okay.
definitely taller than I was when I was first here.
You are.
That tiny silhouette of a child that was scolded and forbidden from going places. Catherine's not that child anymore. And as she approaches the farmhouse, clutching the book tight, she remembers the little girl that stood in front of this farmhouse, that felt far less confident in the fact that she could be her own self. And I think as she looks at the door, she realizes that someone painted it. It's no longer the bright white that was always kept up by her grandfather because he loved to have a pristine door. But someone's painted it yellow. Much cheerier color than a mood ever was brought to this house.
And in the lower right-hand corner is that little girl huddled in the hayloft, crying.
She walks up and sort of inspects that painting at the bottom of the door. Who put you here?
It's so small, you have to bend down.
I think she does.
Oh.
She raises an eyebrow, kind of looks. Why are you hurt?
Silence.
To the side, you see a small bucket of paint with a brush sticking out of it. White.
I'm going to use another change token, actually. It's not white. It's blue. Her
Did
favorite
you paint
color.
the door any years when you were younger, right after your father? Grandfather, sorry.
I think there was one time that she tried to. That her grandma let her choose the color, and she chose a very, almost like a turquoise, green, blue.
I'd say if you look close enough, you can see the little sprinkles from the brush kind of flinging it out on some of the rocks of the facade of the building. Long since faded, but on the places where it's more porous, you can still catch little drops of that color. And it is a reminder of a joy, not of a failure. And you remember the cool drinks brought out that day and the laughing and, oh, we can clean it tomorrow. That's enough for today. And just that afternoon specifically.
Mm-hmm. And she relishes that memory. And I think as she picks up the paintbrush again and makes sure it is coated with that same turquoise blue, she will begin to paint the door once again, starting with that image of her crying in the hayloft. And
Oh.
don't worry, that pain can't live here anymore. She paints over it. And I think that might be
I think so too.
a good place to fade to black, honestly.
That means it's my chapter.
What a terrifying game.
I know.
I'm just trying to keep Emma soul safe, and it's like...
Yeah. Let's take a
Yeah.
quick break
Deal.
Before we go into our third chapter, yeah?
before I really fuck some shit up.
Yep.
You see a sunny day. The sun is filled with bodies.
Thank you
you so
all
much.
for being here and playing this with us. I am having an amazing time. You all are so good to play with.
Oh, this is
I
super
knew this
fun.
was going to be good, and I'm so happy. And imagine if you Welcome back to TTN Presents Under the Autumn Strangely. We've been getting weird and creepy up in here, and it's been so fun. And I'm ready to enter our third chapter, which is the Terrors chapter, which means it is mine. So, who's ready to get started?
I don't know. I feel like I would more likely want to have a crepe, actually, than. I'm
So,
kidding. Let's go ahead.
the sort of tone, because we have pre-selected music, so and we can't hear it. So the tone we're gonna go for is going to be. Do you know the word peripety?
No.
I love this word. It is a sudden realization,
Hmm.
a revelation. And the question, Kat, how is all of this your fault?
Ooh. Interesting.
Hmm. So you were on your way back, I believe. No, we had just entered that door that you had just
Mhm.
repainted. And when you open that door, even though you've never been here, you know one of your greatest regrets is going to face you in one way or another. And I think better than me telling you what it is, I want you to tell me what the smallest piece of it is.
Who? I think as she enters the old farmhouse, the smallest piece of it that she sees and turns over is a photo of a younger version of her that doesn't include her grandmother.
Hmm.
That is just her and her grandfather. And she looks far happier in that photo than she would be later on when she found out the type of person that he really was. And
Before you can stop yourself, you find yourself saying the words, I'm sorry. Who are you saying it to and why?
I'm saying it to my grandmother. And as I turn the photo over, it's an acknowledgement of the fact that I let him make her out to be nobody. I let him erase her in my eyes for so long until he was no longer able to do so. But I'm not that same little girl, and I know more than I did when I was in that photo. And I think I go across that entryway table, turning over photographs because they're all the ones that my grandfather would have wanted to be there. The ones where I did look up to him and where I thought better of him than he truly was. And I don't stop and take in the rest of the house until all of them are turned over.
There are so many photographs, so many captured, imprisoned memories, all of them manufactured. Hundreds and hundreds of framed photographs.
And I turn over every single one. One at a time. Sometimes more if I hate the photo more.
Oh.
And I think if she hears the ow again, she gets frustrated, and the next one she turns over, she cracks the frame because she presses it into the table so hard.
Oh.
from the back of it a handful of loose photographs that were kept hidden against the wall. The front of it, a slightly duller photo of the farm, like no individuals in it, maybe one that wouldn't be taken down too often. And you see a handful of about 10 to 12 Polaroid type size, old, blurred, yellowed at the edges photos fall. Um, that look they were back there for quite some time. Um, you see feminine hands learning how to carve wood.
And I think at that she sort of scoops up the photographs. These are ones she hasn't seen before, ones her
Oh.
hands haven't touched. Am I hurting you? Okay then. And she starts to flip through them, trying to see who the feminine hands belong to. As she flips through photograph after photograph, different parts of the farm.
And as the air stirs, you begin to smell honey. Oh.
Was your grandmother enough of a person to you that you would remember her hands?
I think it depends on if the photo was as old as it sounds. Because by the time that she knew her grandmother's hands, they were old and wrinkled, and they didn't have the strength to carve any wood anymore. They were used for baking more so than anything else, as that had become something that she loved. And her grandfather couldn't really have sweets, so it was more for her than anything else. But they were for baking and for pointing out interesting things in books that she had been forbidden from reading before because they weren't important enough. And those hands are very different than the hands in that photograph.
And in most of them, you will also only see one hand, as though it was taking the photo itself. Like a carved spatula or serving spoon and a knife in like a small feminine hand, wood chips on the ground. Next one, you see like a hand carved picture frame. Simple items that could be used around the house, that could blend easily without gathering too much attention of where they came from or how was this bought or anything like that. But each one of them taken almost like a trophy and then hidden back behind this photo.
Huh. I think seeing the photo frame, she's going to look up at the wall of photographs and start looking for that particular frame and see if she can find it amongst the photos that are on the wall. And there are some photos that she has to ignore, ones that she can't necessarily reach because she is smaller still, though not as small as she was when she was a child.
There's one that sticks out to you, and it is your grandmother's hands holding a blade in black and white, but the apple she's cutting is in full color. And you look at it, and suddenly you're transported back to a memory of her cutting apples to make pie for you. And as she slices into the apple, you can hear the apple sigh with an oh. Every single cut she makes. And just a tiny trickle of blood seeps out of the apple slice at the bottom point of the piece. And in your memory, it starts to pivot almost into a nightmare where time slows down infinitesimally. And she slices into the apple again, and the oh is drawn out into this like droning hum.
And I think watching that, she doesn't want things to be in pain. But especially her grandmother doesn't cause pain. And I think as it draws out further and further, she, like a child again, sort of covers her ears and is like, Grandma, stop! You're hurting it!
And the ows get louder and stretch out into infinity, with each single cut into another apple, another tiny drop of blood on the counter.
I think as it continued, there would be a point where Catherine could no longer stand it, and she would step forward and attempt to take the apple out of her grandmother's hands before she could cut into it again.
And in the tug of war, you suddenly feel a nick on your thumb, and you hear yourself go, "Oh,"
Ow!
as a tiny drop of blood seeps out, just like the apple.
She hides the thumb away in the rest of her hand, almost protecting it from further injury.
And you notice your grandmother is crying, silently.
Grandma, what's wrong?
And then you're back in this room surrounded by photographs, searching for a frame you can't find.
She sort of shakes her head, gathers herself.
Oh.
Okay, where are you?
And you look down and your thumb is bleeding.
And you realize you nicked it on the glass from one of the photos that got damaged in all the shifting. And in this moment of like your pulse quickening and almost like the pressure of the world coming to bear on you a little in this moment, you flip that specific picture and it's also of a pie, a table set to make multiple pies. And you remember that day with your grandmother. It was a quieter one around the farm, meaning no one was there to rain on your joy, as you both laughed and sang and prepared these feasts to take to the neighbors and share the bounty of what you had grown. And you see her laughing and just looking at all, look how many pies you made. This is all your fault, with a big smile on her face.
But then suddenly it gets serious as you go to like cut a slice into one of the extra pies. She's like, "No, not that one. That's for your grandfather."
I thought he couldn't have pie.
It's special.
Okay. And she removes her hand.
The smell of honey in the air.
Mm-hmm.
She takes that
honey.
in.
Is so intense. It's overwhelming.
And it kind of wrinkles her nose a bit as she smells it and looks at her grandma. Is Grandpa gonna be able to eat this? It smells really sweet.
Silence. Take these to the neighbors.
Okay. And she'll pick up a couple of the pies. Blueberry one for the neighbors on the left because their daughter's favorite pie flavor is blueberry.
Mhm.
And the apple pie goes to the Nelsons who live on the right side of their farm. They used to pay her grandparents to come apple picking in the fall, and she remembers because sometimes they would let her play with their daughter while they sort of had a little date afternoon apple picking, just the parents.
And there's a familiar crunch underfoot as you look down, and the frame you were looking for is there, broken.
She pauses, puts the pies down, is careful to try and avoid the glass this time as she sort of picks it up, examines it.
What is the image again?
The image of the frame or in the frame?
In the frame.
I don't think we've locked in that specific one yet because she couldn't find that frame.
I
Mhm.
didn't. Yeah, I thought so.
And it was empty in the photograph. So she wasn't sure what was in it.
What do you see?
I think she sees her grandmother and grandfather's wedding photo. A time when the two of them were happy together, which is something that she has never really seen in her time of being there.
Isn't memory funny that way?
Mhm. It can be.
The smell of honey is even stronger. Nauseating.
I think as the smell grows stronger, she is going to turn back to the table to try and find out why it's become that way.
Oh.
She looks around for the source of the pain again.
It sounds so close every time.
And every time just out of reach. It's starting to frustrate Catherine.
Oh.
Where are you? Why are you hurt?
Oh. And you look down at your thumb. Oh. The cut said it.
Ooh, can we fast forward over that detail a little
Yep. Absolutely.
bit?
We hear the sound of wood cracking as the broken frame that you set on like the table, almost like little vines begin sprouting out of the porous parts of the wood and bringing it back together and tightening into its original shape.
Huh. She stares at the frame a little bit, watching as that comes together.
Similar vine as the other you saw, small, but it still looks like, a little bicep, a little shoulder, the same shapes within the larger vine.
She approaches it, and she's going to start to help it put the frame back together. I think she still knows where there'd be a little bit of super glue in one of the kitchen drawers, because there's always a junk drawer that has everything that everyone just kind of throws around that's half used, but will probably be needed later. And with the help of this little shoulder and bicep vine, she manages to repair the little wooden frame.
When you take the little lid off the glue container, obviously like a homestead container, there's a little label on the top that just says glue, and the moment you unscrew it, the smell of honey just hits your nose.
And her nose wrinkles again, brow furrows. Why are you still here? Why
And
are
you look around and you see so many frames that have been glued back together. All of these memories, poses, smiles faked, glued in place in their frames.
And she kind of frowns. Where are the real photos? I know they're here. She clutches the Polaroid ones, the ones that she was holding. Those ones that were hidden behind all of the faked photographs. She wants more like that. That holds the real key to what she was missing when she was younger. I think she wanders around the house a little bit more, into the living rooms and other areas to start to try and search for some.
There's one place you know you could look. There was a stack of Polaroids that your grandfather was holding when he died. That's just upstairs.
No one did ever move anything in that room after that. And she sort of steels herself at that memory. Tucks the other photos into a pocket on her jacket and takes a deep breath before she makes her way for the stairs, leading up to the second floor where his bedroom was.
And you hear one final "oh" behind you.
She looks over her shoulder. She doesn't see anything obvious.
Just an odd rustling somewhere in the corner, maybe?
Okay,
You can't
that
tell.
that would make her turn fully around.
You don't see anything.
Of course I don't. And she's going to continue up the stairs.
There's a sudden memory of your childhood on these stairs. It comes with a flash, brighter, more full of color. What is it?
I think it encompasses when she was younger, before she got scolded more for being more adventurous. And she had, while her grandfather was napping and her grandmother had gone out to the barn, she had wondered what it would feel like to, you know how sometimes as a kid you'll do crazy things, and she had seen some photographs that her mother and father had shown her of them going to an amusement park when they were younger. And she wondered what it would feel like to go down one of those hills. So she decided to, on those stairs, recreate a roller coaster using a couch cushion as her roller coaster cart and ride it down the stairs.
That's gone now. What part of your childhood died taking that from you?
I think that was the moment that her grandfather discovered how adventurous she really was, how wild of a child she really was. Everything else before that point he could explain away as just normal child behavior. But I think when he woke up from his nap to her sliding very noisily down the stairs on a couch cushion, it couldn't really be ignored anymore. And that was kind of what started him on the path to trying to tame that wildness.
And you're ripped back to the present, on the stairs, creaking, gray and dusty as you ascend.
And I'll say behind you, you're not aware of this yet, but us, the dear viewers who are watching from a privileged position, we've seen a long green verdant vine that's worked its way across the farm that's beginning to wind up the banisters in thin little offshoots and to creep across the floor of the bottom. Not overwhelming, not thick and limb size, but small, like fresh sprouts, just creeping through the house behind you, following in your path.
A series of tiny little arms holding each other, forearm to forearm, bent.
I think I will use my change token here
Mm-hmm.
to not necessarily get rid of it, but to yes and it a little bit in a specific way.
You can change mine, but you can't change the tear. Okay, yeah.
I know.
Just making sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think as those arms connect up the banister, there's something else that covers them. A new vine that's growing alongside them. One that, as it follows their path, sprouts flowers in its wake. Blue flowers. And unfortunately, Catherine cannot see them as she continues her way up. She pauses in front of that door, takes another deep breath before she reaches down to open it.
It is also yellow.
And we see a blue flower in the corner of the cover of your grandmother's book you're carrying from the side as you reach out to take the doorknob.
I think she would, before opening the door, open the book and take comfort in that little flower that sticks out from it.
Just wondering, why is the book so dangerous?
Well, the book passed the flower that was pressed into it. It
If I could, before you answer, spend a
Yeah.
token, why was the book so dangerous?
Ooh. I think the book was so dangerous originally because it held a magic.
Do you think it had anything to do with the blue flowers that she put in that apple pie?
There definitely wasn't a specific spell in it that hinted at that. That one,
Foxglove is so pretty.
it is. But that recipe Grandma must have kept to herself, if there was one. This one she filled with herbs to heal, to put in teas to help when you can't sleep, and little things that you can do to make sure that a space is inviting for people if you want it to be.
What made this space so uninviting?
Her grandfather never thought that those things were necessary. All the little charms that she would hang around the house for prosperity or love, he would take down once he found them, hidden amongst his photos. And She is deathly aware of the absence of that as she opens that door into the space that was entirely his own.
Why are you so afraid, so terrified to open it?
It was another forbidden space as a child. Even touching that door handle led to harsh consequences when she was younger, ones that she never forgot. And I think she takes another look at that blue flower and she remembers that none of those consequences are here for her now. But she is again much taller and much braver than she was back then. And he is not there to scold her for going somewhere that she was told not to go.
A sudden memory comes back. When you were younger, you snuck into this room. What did you find that changed everything?
I think when she searched the room, she found hidden things. Tickets. What looked like lottery tickets, I think. Many of them scratched off, but there were dozens of them of all different types and more than she'd ever seen anyone else buy. Her dad had maybe come home with like one or two of them, would give them to her for Christmas. But it was always oh, there's no chance you'll win any of these.
Maybe he wasn't such a bad farmer after all.
In this space, I'd say you see an old, like, roll-up desk that looks like it's probably busted, so it wouldn't open very easily. Almost a broken down bookshelf, still a few pictures on the wall in this space, and then like a single person bed up against a corner for those years when they started sleeping in different rooms. And there could be more if my counterpart would like to add anything from the get-go.
I'll get there. I have ideas.
Okay.
She wanders into it. And she kind of takes in each detail. The decay of the room. Almost as if it lost its presence. That sense of foreboding. The moment that he no longer occupied that space. And he sees how she sees how poorly everything's been taken care of. How it's all faded away. And she kind of smiles at the fact that he would probably hate that his space was not in pristine condition. But she's remembering that stack of Polaroids. And she wants to find out what they were, what was on them. So she moves towards the bed where they were.
Perfect. I imagine you first sitting on the bed for a moment to think about where they might be. And like putting your hand on the pillow where he died. Why does the pillow feel wrong?
If I may interject while you think real quick, because it won't change your answer. Downstairs, unseen once again, when you put your hand on that pillow, those same vines kind of bloom instantly, and we start seeing small pumpkins forming, growing between stair banisters or into cabinets, under furniture, and any cracks they can find of the foundation.
Hmm. And as she puts her hand on that pillow, it feels wet.
What how?
The blood stain that he left was never taken care of, but it feels fresh, but it's not blood when she looks at it. It's ooze from a pumpkin.
And it smells like honey.
Mm-hmm.
She kind of wrinkles her nose, pulls her hand away quickly, rubs it on her pants that have now dried, but barely. She looks up at the hat she's still wearing.
It's a
taking it
hat.
off her head.
Just a hat, Emma.
Is it juicy?
I don't know.
Catherine is going to inspect it further. See if she can figure out where the giggle came from.
Mm-hmm.
No sign.
Okay. She'll put the hat on the bedside table. Start looking for the Polaroids. Opening drawers, checking under the bed.
In one of the drawers, you see a deed to the farm. You'd expect your grandfather's name, and instead you see the name of your parents.
She holds that for a second. It's been a while since she spoke to them, too. Though she's surprised that they wouldn't tell her that they were the ones who had the farm.
Want to use a change token? They couldn't. You haven't visited their graves in long enough.
Of course not. And she remembers that. And she wonders if they would have told her before they died. She puts the deed on the bed so that she has easy access to it. Not on the pillow, but on the foot of the bed, away from the pumpkin ooze that could damage it. And keeps looking.
Down
Definitely.
below, down below again, the pumpkins, woof, the vines woof, growing into the space of your farmhouse.
If the bank hadn't taken it.
If
And
the
there's a
bank
moment
hadn't
where
taken it.
you certainly know that what you're looking for was hidden away because you weren't supposed to remember. But there is a loose floorboard under the bed.
Hmm.
That's how you found the receipts.
And I think she will pull up that same floorboard and check inside.
Ow! A sliver.
Damn it.
Beyond what else you find there, you see thin green vines working their way underneath the floorboard.
She'll sort of look at them. Where'd you come from?
And there's an ominous rumble.
Well, that's not good.
But within the same spot, you also find a small box, dusty, cap still on it, about 3 inches by 4 inches, not large.
With a little chromed handle.
Hmm. She'll reach in, pick up the box.
You
Okay.
hear the teapot whistling of the vines. Tiny, high-pitched.
You swear one of them slightly lifted the box to you.
And she'll smile at it, almost giving it a nod of thanks, before she leans back out from under the bed and sits down to open the box. I take it she finds the Polaroids that she remembered?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay.
The torrent of memories start flooding back that you had cast out to protect yourself. What's one of them?
I think one of them was the sound of his scream. After he made the mistake of eating that pie.
And the house rumbles.
I think she remembers her grandmother calmly walking back down the stairs as he cried out, calling for her.
And there's a tilt to the floor.
I think I remember asking her what was happening, and her telling me not to worry about it, and whatever I did, don't go upstairs. As she grabbed that photo frame and stuffed it in a bag full of other things that she was taking with her and left
And
for the
something
last time.
snaps. And you're not sure if it's the house or inside you.
I think I snap out of those memories. And I start looking around, trying to figure out exactly that. If it did, if something did snap within me or within the house.
Why is all of this your fault?
Because I needed to know what was happening. And I kept her too long on the way out. I could have just let her get away with it.
And I think that is when everything goes black and the house collapses.
Okay.
How we doing?
I'm good.
Good.
Heck yeah.
Did anyone spend all their change?
I did, yes.
Oh, okay, that's
I
right,
only
that's
had
right.
the one to
That's
spend.
right.
Mm-hmm. So, everybody have fun?
Yes.
Heck
What
yeah.
a great game.
This was
Yay.
fantastic. Thank you, Graham, who might still be in the chat, who is here, who wrote this game. I'm
Mhm.
so glad we got to play this, and I'm so glad I got to play with you two. This slapped. Thank you so
Mhm.
much. So,
Oh,
what were your images, Rah, as
I
the
was about to
Arcadian?
flip that whole thing to such a happier ending. God damn it. My images were a windmill with no purpose, question mark.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had corn or pumpkins that can turn to stone or wood.
I love that.
Ooh, so it was gonna build a new house.
Well,
Oh,
I wanted you to find a note from your grandma that it was like happy, like this was all your fault because I had a reason to fight.
oh.
But then Juicy's like, nope, house falls.
It can make way for something new.
Oh no, that is so
Hmm.
good. Just so I was on
Mhm.
edge, just waiting, like, what's Juicy gonna do the
What do
whole
you think
time?
my theme was?
Mm.
I'm curious what
Bad
your guesses
grandpa.
are. Bad grandpa. What about you, Emma?
Hmm. I genuinely don't know. I
Okay.
think the closest thing I could come to, there were so many twists and turns in that.
Mhm.
The only thing I can really think of is expectation.
Not bad. Lost dreams, the end of things, the end of a future once wished for.
Mm.
That's one of the things that's so cool about autumn too, because it's like right before winter, so everything, but it's like this weird hidden spring where like you can plant a lot of things in autumn. It
Mm-hmm.
just takes time to change and grow and
Mm-hmm.
shift through
Mhm.
Death and
winter.
rebirth.
Yeah, so just some beautiful vibes going on. Emma, what was your themes? I
I
know,
don't think I had to
yeah,
make
yeah,
Yeah.
you
any.
didn't
The
have any.
traveler doesn't have
Um,
secrets.
I just want to know if
no.
you had one.
No, I didn't. But I kind of had that idea of like when I put her together, I wanted like someone very curious that was going to
Mhm.
lean into what either of you came up with. And I wanted this kind of like idea of adventure and whimsy, but she kind of leaned into this idea of as we uh grew into it, not necessarily she was adventurous,
Mhm.
but this idea that she still had to um that she had adapted in a certain way to what was going on,
Yeah.
and it sacrificed a little bit of that whimsy, I think. And I love that we all kind of leaned into that vibe. As we were kind of talking on the break, there was a lot less whimsy than any of us were expecting before we went
Yes,
into this.
absolutely. Yeah.
We're like, here's an autumn world. Let's go inside grandfather's private bedroom. Like we just got more and more micro. And then there's a small box in grandpa like
Mhm.
Yes.
I kind of wanted to know. Here's a fun one, Rara. I kind of want to know because the only thing I didn't really explore was the well.
Mhm, mhm.
So what would have been
Mm.
in the well
I
if
had a
I'd
few
gone over
notes I had
there?
made while just we were going in case, and it was going to be kind of small, like the size of a bucket. So potential for if you went into it getting stuck a little bit. That was
Mm.
more for Juicy to play with. But at the bottom, I was going to see that a light was coming out of one side of the well, like visible, kind of like the end of one of the shafts in Lost.
Uh-huh.
Like you could
Ooh.
just see that there was something else down
Oh,
there.
that's cool.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah, I really wanted to find opportunities for like surreal horror moments where
Yeah.
something has like an off texture or it behaves in a wrong way and
Mhm.
defies expectation. And it's very
Same.
textural, and
The
I loved
objects
it.
feeling pain. That wasn't
Yeah.
creepy at all.
And I could see your face when it was coming too. It's like here's a bouquet of flowers, and you get this little smirk, like they're filled with teeth. Like,
uh,
Or
but
just
hopefully.
oh, just a
yeah,
soft
yeah,
out. You know what made me think of that was the like dust motes in Miyazaki movies.
mm,
Mm.
And
very
like
cool.
how some things have weird ill like met voices that are much softer than they should be in some Miyazaki films.
Mhm.
Like in Totoro, for example, there's a lot of that.
That's the one I
And
haven't seen.
and I love that as sort of a surreal horror like aesthetic. Even though
Mhm.
Miyazaki's not going for that, it plays on some of that for like capturing the weird in a fantastical way.
I definitely
So
got a
yeah.
little bit of like some Spirited Away vibes
Oh yeah.
almost because I always saw that one as like
Mhm.
one that I didn't expect to be horror and turned out to be.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Well, just the end,
definitely.
the
Yeah.
house is collapsed, the windmill's still turning, and like I even imagine the vine going and pulling the ribbon off your wrist because it made you easy to find.
Oh.
Like that's what I was kind of like, okay, all right, we could do that. But I also didn't know if we were
Mhm.
gonna do a whole nother round. So I was like waiting
Mm.
right then, like, are we done? Or okay,
No, we've been going
okay.
for a little while now.
Yeah.
No,
The
it's
one,
I thought
two,
it was a great
three kind
time.
of.
It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
just one of those games where you'll leave it with like a dozen things in your head, like, oh, I wish we could have gone back to that and taken that a
Mhm.
little
Yeah.
further.
I
I'd
would
Great
love
also
to
system.
see how this ran as a longer term series for sure.
mm,
Mm,
or like I want to see how this plays with us moved around.
mm,
Mm.
Because we are all so creatively different. We were in the obvious roles for
yeah,
ourselves. Like
agreed.
we
Mhm.
all came in basically predetermining exactly what we had independently without a conversation.
Yeah,
Yep.
within 10 seconds, Emma and I were like, Juicy's the tear.
Yep. We knew she was gonna take that role immediately, and then I was like, "Well, rah rah, I could go either way," but it kind of made sense.
Yeah. And yeah, I'd like to switch it up where like I don't know, either I'm the obviously either the Arcadian or the Traveler. I don't know which one I want to be challenged with more.
Mhm.
Mm.
Because I love all three of these roles. Graham, if you're still there, I really love the construction of this game, and as sort of a narrative fuel or for the vehicle that is the story we're telling. It's so cool, and I want to play around with it a lot.
If they're
Mm.
still in the chat, mad props to the Kellhop because they sent me a summary of this game before I ever heard of it from anyone anywhere. Like, Rara, have you seen the vibes of this? And now it's just been a pleasure to play. Beautiful game,
Mhm.
Graham, if you're still
Yeah.
listening.
Oh yeah, this is definitely something that I would. I read it rah rah, and I was like, "This is up his alley for sure."
Oh, I love
No
GMing in a
question.
fancy forest. It's like my main move.
Mhm.
All right. Well, shall we leave it there and do some outros?
I think so, and I think it would be fun if, as we did our outros, we kind of said what role we think would be the most interesting to play next if we played this again. That wasn't the
Okay.
one that we played.
All right. I guess I'll start then. I am Juicy Garland, Boston area drag queen and super nerd, part of Tabletop Tailspinners and in a whole bunch of our content. I also do content elsewhere, so I can talk about Tabletop Tailspinners as much as possible. So you can find me in All Our Faults, a TTN production. You can find me doing our Monster Hearts miniseries every other Friday, which this Friday we are on at 8 p.m. That's the right time, right? I think
Yes.
so. But also outside of TTN, those are just a couple examples. You can find me sometimes in the Queer XP, where I also do extra gay horror gaming because I'm just too gay for one network, really. And because I'm an internet slut, you can find me in a lot of places. So pay attention to my social media at Juicy Garland or at juicy.garland for more. And I can't wait until I get to play games with you again, Emma, once every 2 years. And you again,
Mhm.
Rara, once every 6 months. That's about our cycles.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Rara,
and
you
that's
go.
fun.
I think I'd have fun playing the Traveler. I think playing the Terror would be a little more of a using my powers for evil type of vibe, which I don't do that often, but
Mm.
I'd be excited to try.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't say mine,
no, you
which
did. That's
I
why
want to
I
do the
started.
Acadian,
Mhm.
so I can challenge myself by being more optimistic and positive, like you were, and I challenge you to be the terror.
Oh, and I could easily play a traveler, just a little word about all this corn. But hey, I'm Rora. I create and run the Heart is a Dungeon podcast. We're a little fledgling podcast in our first year, just having fun telling stories with
Mm.
friends. I actually don't think I'm anywhere live before PAX, which is a really good feeling to be honest, but I will be hosting a panel at PAX U on sad storytelling.
Ooh.
And then I'll be showing up on a few channels in December. I'll be on Folk and Myth for a Christmas game. I'll be showing up on Science and Sorcery for some Orbital Blues that we're recording. I'll be on Relict on TTN at some point next year when that comes out.
Me too.
And I'm in Hellwellers, which is currently coming out on Game Master Monday. Two
Yes.
of the 4 episodes are out, and it's all religious trauma in hell, like on the Lake of Fire hunting a great white whale. It's a pretty great cast and a series, so I'll shout out Game Master Monday today. Thank you so much for this, TTN. I'm a pleasure to be welcomed into the fold from time to time.
There's definitely more room for us to have you at more tables, and we appreciate whenever you do come
I
to
love
the
it
table,
over here.
Aurora. Yes. And last but not least, as far as what I would love to do next, I think I would love to challenge myself to step into that opposite role of the terror, actually.
I'd like to see that too.
Because I tend to want to be that optimist a lot of the times. And so I would be interested to see how I could step into that role and sort of twist everything a little more and make it a little more dark, because I can do horror. I've done 10 Candles before, which this network will see eventually, and did
So
see in our
Emma the
fundraisers.
terror, Juicy as the Arcadian,
Yeah.
and I would play the Traveler the next time,
Mhm.
and then we'd rotate
Okay.
again after that. Okay,
Yeah.
That means
so
we
it'll be
need
a
it next
Trinity.
time.
Yeah, it'll be a Trinity series.
We can definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
Do you
Heck
guys
yeah.
know the people who run the channel or anything?
Oh,
We
I
can
don't
talk
know.
to 'em.
Yeah, okay.
Well, if you don't know who I am still, my name's Emma. I'm the founder and creative director of the Tabletop Talespinners Network.
Oh,
We are a TTRPG podcast network whose mission is making diversity our strength, and primarily featuring players and GMs mainly that you don't always see featured on other actual plays. I produce all of the podcasts on this network, of which we have 4 currently available. We have our fan favorite Monster Hearts 2 podcast that Juicy already mentioned, All Our
so
Faults,
good, so good.
and our 3 D&D 5e podcasts, Chronicles and Kriath and Improv Madness, which I DM, and then Magnificence, which I'm a player on. I play an adorable little Triton wizard named Kuvos Nemenath, who, as you'll see, is still figuring out how the politics of this world work.
Yeah. Little out of their depth here and there in that world.
Oh, absolutely. But the only role that I'm playing off the channel currently is Josette Pernet, a French Nosferatu over in Philly by Night, where Juicy and I play very different versions of Nosferatu.
Yes.
That happens once a month over on the Twitch channel Ain't Got Crit. So keep an eye out for when that happens. I will definitely be promoting that, because things have definitely been getting very interesting. And I'm set to guest storytell at some point a vignette for a couple of my cast members called The Room. So if you want to know what The Room is, keep an eye out for that.
I
And
did not hit her. I did not.
oh my god. Not that room.
Oh,
I'm
God,
starting
not
a
that room.
token for it to be that room.
But yeah, that's about it for me. Thank you all so much for joining us for this fun, awesome game, and thank you to Graham for writing said fun, awesome game. This was a blast.
Thank you
And
to our producer.
yes,
thank you,
thank you,
Haven.
Haven.
Yeah.
We appreciate you, and thank you to everyone who tuned in today. We appreciate it, and we hope you enjoyed our very spooky autumn tale. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.